have your camera on at this point. All right, everybody? Go ahead, Val.
Welcome to the 5th International CFUW Parksville Qualicum Women's Day event. Thank you for joining our event this evening. We will now watch a very compelling video.
This is the one that I put on.
Thank you, Victoria. I am Valerie Gunn, the president of the Parksville Qualicum Canadian Federation of University Women. And this is our 5th event that we have held on International Women's Day. The Canadian Federation of University Women acknowledges that we are indebted to First Nations, Salish people on whose land we inhabit. We pay respect to their cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationships to the land, air, and sea. International Women's Day was created by the United Nations as a day to remind each of us from every race, culture, demographic, orientation to make a commitment to women everywhere, to make a stand for human rights. It is a day when we reflect on our progress. As our video noted, who would have thought? I'm sure those women 100 years ago when they started marching, and it's from that we've created International Women's Day, would never have believed that there would have been so many women leaders. It is a day to reflect on our progress, to honor those pioneers, and to welcome our next generation of pioneers. This year's theme is Choose to Challenge. How can we all challenge and call out gender bias and inequality? And this theme fits with our evening's topic of Me Too. I would now like to welcome and introduce our Member of Parliament for our area, Courtenay Alberni Gord Johns. Mr. Johns has been our Member of Parliament since 2015, and I believe he's addressed our event every year. Welcome, Gord Johns.
Thanks, Val. It's such an inspiration to be here after that, especially after that film. Good evening, everyone. I'm here in the traditional territory of the Sishat and Huipachesset people. First, let me say I'm reassured and comforted in these uncertain times that the Canadian Federation of University Women in Parksville Qualicum is still on the job. I am well aware that your work is by no means limited to this annual celebration of International Women's Day. Your organization, without question, is making a difference in our communities 12 months of the year, pandemic or no pandemic. Whether it's your fight for universal and affordable quality childcare, or your fight for the health of our planet, or the many other causes that you champion, you are making a difference. You're collaborative, you're progressive, and you are bold. This year, you have chosen a keynote speaker who will challenge all of us, I am sure, to reconsider popular culture and its portrayal of the realities faced by women in our society. And I look forward to hearing Dorothy Wooden speak, and I'm grateful to her and to the Canadian Federation of University for Women for making this happen today. And I just really want to thank you for that. And for me, as your Member of Parliament, International Women's Day is, of course, about many things, but it's about affordable childcare. It's about implementing the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls calls for justice. It's about a national plan to end gender-based violence and to update the Canada Labour Code to provide 10 days of paid leave for those dealing with family and domestic violence. These are the things that I have been thinking about today. These are some of the things that have been promised to women for far too long and not delivered. Women, as you know, are disproportionately feeling the impacts of the pandemic, from homeschooling to household responsibilities. Canadian women are carrying their families throughout this crisis. Our recovery from the pandemic needs to be a feminist one that advances gender equity, because when women succeed, not just our economy prospers, but everything prospers. Thank you again for all of your work and for the invitation for me to say a few words tonight. Again, I feel so honored and privileged to join you. And I look forward to listening and learning tonight. And happy International Women's Day to all of you. Again, thank you so much for letting me join you tonight.
Thank you, Gord. There we go. Okay. CFUW, the power of women working together. We are a 100-year strong organization with over 70 clubs across Canada. On Vancouver Island, where Parksville Qualicum is located, there are 6 clubs. At a recent communication dialogue in the fall of 2020, the members came up with the values of CFUW, outlined in a picture, and the first one was advocacy. Second, friendship. Third, education for women and girls, followed by lifelong learning. CFUW was started by women university graduates in 1919 to highlight and advocate for graduates in university positions, government, and other places of renown. We've come a long way since then. A university degree is no longer a necessary criteria for membership, but being open to lifelong learning is. Wanting to advocate on behalf of women and girls in all spheres of influence is a criteria for membership. Our local club is active. Even this season, we had the Red Dress Project to raise awareness for Indigenous murdered and missing women, which is still being shown locally. In normal times, we have a huge book sale fundraiser in the fall for the Scholarship and Bursary Trust. However, this did not happen in 2020, but I'm happy to say that members and friends of our club donated enough money to allow our trust to give out the same amount this year as we did in 2020. The particulars of our scholarships and bursaries are on our website, CFUWPQ.ca. The deadline for all of these is June the 1st. Victoria is going to list that website in the public chat. We have already been receiving applications. Tell all the girls you know who need school money, apply. We have back to school bursaries for women returning to school, as well as a bursary for a woman going into ECE program. Our club also has a global reach committee, and we support girls in Tanzania and school projects in Guatemala and Pakistan. Lastly, national advocacy is a major preoccupation of our club. Next month, there are 4 national resolutions which we shall be voting on, and they will be voted on across Canada. And once these are approved, they then become policy, which enables clubs to advocate to all levels of government on that policy topic. CFUW is a dynamic group of women who've taken to this new virtual normal with a surprising vigor. We could all be on Zoom 8 hours a day, all day. We welcome new members. Please see the chat for our website to talk to us about membership. Our next meeting is April the 8th. I will now like to hand over to our committee chair, Sonia Felix, to introduce this evening's speaker, Dorothy Woodend from the Tyee. Thank you.
Hi, it's my pleasure to introduce Dorothy Woodend tonight. She's our guest speaker with an English degree from Simon Fraser University and a degree in film animation from Emily Carr University. Dorothy has worked in a range of cultural disciplines, from including producing dance and music concerts, running a small press, and programming film festivals. She's a member of the Broadcast Film Critics Association, the Vancouver Film Critics Circle, and is the senior festival advisor for Doxa Documentary Film Festival in Vancouver. Dorothy is also an award-winning writer with work published in newspapers and magazines all across Canada and the United States. She is currently the culture editor at the Tyee, which is a BC-based online news magazine. In this role, she covers social trends and cultural issues with wit, insight, and a good dose of humor. Dorothy joins us tonight to talk about gender trends in film and how women's roles are changing. Here she is with Female Trouble, Movies and Me Too.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Dorothy.
Thank you for inviting me tonight. It's a great pleasure to be here with you, doing this virtually from Vancouver. So before we get rolling, I wanted to acknowledge that I'm coming tonight from the unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. So thank you very much for allowing me to join you tonight. I've given talks before, never on Zoom. So this is a very first thing for me, although we do have Zoom meetings every day at the Tyee, and sometimes mostly technology works. Occasionally it kind of goes horribly awry. So touch wood, we won't have any mishaps today. I was telling Victoria earlier on the weekend, because we did a little bit of a technical run through, that when I was with Doxa as the director of programming and the festival director, invariably you would, test and test and test film format And guaranteed on the night, that you were opening in front of like 1,200 people or, 2,000, 2,500 people in the, big sort of major venues for the festival, something would kind of go horribly wrong. So even if it does, we're going to get through it. So, we'll hang tight. So before we get kind of rolling and jumping into the conversation tonight, I just wanted to thank the organizers, Sonia and also Victoria, for just being so welcoming and so helpful. And it's a great honor and a great privilege to be here with you and to talk some film and some Me Too. And I think we'll have time post me talking for us to have a little more of a broader discussion, a little bit of a Q&A afterwards, so which will be kind of fun. So let's get going. So for those of you who don't know the Tyee, it's an online magazine that was started, I think in, oh lordy, how long has it been? 2003 by a man named David Beers. And I met Dave when he was the editor at the Vancouver Sun. He was editing the Saturday section, which was called Mix. And I was, he was my editor then. And when he left the Sun, he said, I'm gonna start this new online magazine called the Tyee. And I'm thinking, online magazine, what is that exactly? So we had, a meeting at a little kind of cheap sushi joint. And he said, do you want to do some writing? And I said, sure. And he said, okay, what do you want to write about? And I said, I want to write about film. Because I, had been a freelancer for a number of years and I'd written all kinds of different things, but, food, fashion, just about everything under the sun. But film has always been my first love. So that's kind of how it got started. And I think I wrote my very first film review for the Tyee in May of 2004. And it was a piece about Mean Girls, oddly enough, which seems very kind of weirdly appropriate now in a strange way. So kind of what I wanted to talk about tonight is that sort of strange, convergence, if you will, of the personal and the political to sort of, take that old feminist adage that the personal is political, because I think in film world, they're really kind of bound up together and so inextricably, sometimes it's kind of hard to pry them apart. And that's very true for my own experience coming to the film world. I did not grow up anywhere close to any kind of film centers. I grew up in the Kootenays, which is a tiny little sort of, southeast corner of the province, almost on the American border and close to the Alberta border. So essentially kind of in the middle of absolutely nowhere. And I grew up on a farm on the east shore of Kootenay Lake and about 30 miles from the nearest town. So it was pretty remote, pretty rural, and we were farm kids. And the name of the game, on a farm is, you don't work, you don't eat, which is what my grandfather always used to like to yell at us when we were not working hard enough. So, it was like picking cherries, picking peaches, picking apples, anything that could be picked, we picked it. And, our sort of least favorite thing that we had to pick was picking rocks. And whenever he would plow a field, we'd have to follow behind the tractor, like picking up rocks and throwing them onto the back of the cart. And so it was not glamorous, my childhood by any stretch of imagination. But the one thing I think that growing up in a kind of remote and relatively kind of isolated part of Canada and part of the world is that it kind of gives you a lot of scope to dream and scope to, kind of pine and yearn for these bigger ideas and these bigger things that are out there. And for me, they came through movies. Like movies were the one thing that I sort of gravitated to, is these kind of, messages in a bottle that you could look at and think, this is what's happening, somewhere in Paris or London or Vancouver, all these cool cities that you knew were out there, but, maybe you would get there one day, hopefully. But in order to sort of, even have a little kind of taste of that, you would get it through movies. And there was actually a couple of theaters in Preston, which is the closest town to where I grew up. one of which was the Tivoli, and it was, I think it opened in 1938 because my mom actually remembers going there as a little girl. So by the time we came along, the Tivoli, it's probably seen better days. It's a little bit kind of on the, not entirely threadbare, but you know, a little on the rough side. And but still, I had some pretty seminal film experiences there. And I remember a few in particular that sort of still I can vividly recall. One of which we had gone to see The Elephant Man, David Lynch's film about John Merrick. And at the very end of the film, because the projector bulb was too hot, it burnt through the film stock, it burnt through the film. So, you know, it's this kind of white light in the center of the film, and then it kind of slowly burnt out. And I remember thinking, like, that is the most incredibly cool way to end a film I've ever seen in my life. Like, Lynch is a genius. Although I don't know what we were doing to The Elephant Man at, you know, such a tender age. But the Tivoli was an institution. It would, you know, where you would go with your like grade 5 boyfriend, and all your girlfriends would sit behind you in the back row to see if he's going to put his arm around you. And so there were some pretty kind of, you know, formative things that happened. And the other place to see film in Creston was the drive-in. So the drive-in was a bit more, you know, even a bit more of a wilder scene. It was really only open, I think, essentially from like June until September. So during the summer months where you could, you know, sit out on the grass. And the whole point of going to the drive-in was to try to get in as many people for free as you possibly could when we were kids. So, you know, you'd hide in the back of the station wagon with a blanket over your head and try to sneak in. And then after, once you were actually inside the drive-in, you would go and sneak up to the front and sit on the grass with your blanket and try to avoid the, you know, teenagers who worked there who kind of roam around with their flashlights looking to see who had paid and who hadn't paid. And so it was kind of this sort of game of cat and mouse with, you know, really scary, mean teenagers. And there was a few other very idiosyncratic things about the drive-in, one of which is that they would regularly interrupt the film, whatever was playing, at the very end of the night to let you know that the snack bar was closing. So, and it didn't matter what was playing. It could be, you know, this sort of tearful, tragic scene, and this sort of squawking announcement would come over the speaker saying, the snack bar is closing, and ta-da-da. So one time in particular, we had gone to see E.T. and we were all completely distraught and, you know, overwhelmed and crying hysterically over the fact that E.T. had died in the film. And of course, the snack bar announcement came on. And it was sort of, you know, this rude awakening from the cinematic dream that we'd sort of been in. So that was the nature of the drive-in. But the one great thing about the drive-in was that we would see anything that was playing. It didn't really matter what it was. So you got to see films that, you know, you had no right to see as a child, as a younger person. And those were kind of the ones where you're standing on tiptoe trying to understand what it is that's happening in this sort of 70s art house fair, you know, has Chris Christopherson in it, and, you know, lots of weird sex and murder and all kinds of terrible things. And, you know, my parents would kind of be slinking down in shame when they realized what they had kind of dragged their children to go and see. And finally, the third way that I got access to film in those days was basically on TV. So this was before the days of VHS. It was before the days of, you know, DVD, when if you got to see a film, you know, on the television channel, it was like a gift from the cinematic gods, and we're like, thank you, cinematic gods. So the one film, you know, that we kind of like prayed to see time and time again was a John Ford film from 1952 called The Quiet Man. And my sister and I have a twin sister. We were just completely obsessed with this film. And it's an interesting film. So I'll give you a little sort of plot synopsis just to set up the clip that I'm about to show you. So John Wayne plays a boxer named Sean Thornton. and he accidentally kills a man in the ring, and is so kind of overwhelmed with grief and remorse, and that he has to flee to Ireland, his ancestral home, where his family still owns land. So he goes to this little tiny village called Innisfree, which is, you know, your sort of quintessential Hollywood version of a quaint Irish village. There's like the dueling Catholic and Protestant priests. There's the little tiny matchmaker who's perpetually drunk. I mean, everybody in the village is pretty much always drunk. So there are some cliches, you know, at work in this film, but at the same time, it's very beautifully shot. It's, you know, lovely to look at. So John Wayne shows up in Innisfree, and of course, the very first woman that he sees is this fiery redhead named Mary Kate Danaher, played by Maureen O'Hara, at her most, you know, towering and powerful. And of course, it's immediate, you know, overwhelming love. And they have this kind of violent courtship where he's always kind of throwing her around and violently kissing her. And my sister and I would, you know, have these sort of paroxysms of delight from watching this film. So after this very vigorous courting, they finally get married. But of course, there's, you know, complications in that he refuses her dowry from her brother. And so she refuses to consummate the marriage. And they have this epic fight on their wedding night. And he throws her on the bed, and the bed breaks in half. And, you know, the next day when the villagers come to deliver her furniture, and they see this, you know, shattered bed. And the little sort of Irish matchmaker, whose name is, oh Lord, what's his name again? Micheline O'Flynn, I think. And so he looks at this broken bed and he goes, impetuous, Homeric. So, you know, this is, to this day, my sister and I, if we want to make each other laugh, we'll like say, impetuous, Homeric. So the film lives on in very sort of dramatic fashion. So I'm going to show you a little clip from it, and hopefully all of our technology will be working. So this comes at almost at the very end of the film, after they've had this very kind of raucous, you know, courtship and marriage. And Mary Kate Danaher has run away from Sean because she's trying to sort of make a point, make a stand. And of course, he goes after her to kind of bring her home. And that's where we will jump in. So hopefully, touch wood, this will work. And okay, I have to get this and this. All right, you ready? And if it's too loud, just let me know.
You need to share your screen, Dorothy.
Oh, is it not shared?
No, it's not shared yet.
Oh, shit. Okay, sorry. Oh, no. Why is it not working?
And if it's Danaher's, I'll fire the lot. Horse could not. Ah, what a day for Innisfree.
Oh,
On
is
a
it
day
working
like
now?
this, I can say
It's
only
perfect.
one thing.
Okay,
Gentlemen,
I'll full screen
the
it for you
drinks
and
are
then
on
go
the
back a little bit.
house. Well, they are.
It's only 5 miles. Just a good stretch of the legs.
Captain, ma'am, you've lost your shoe.
Thank you very kindly, sir. Oh, get off. on, here's a good stick to beat the lovely lady.
Thanks.
Your in-laws are coming to visit you, Squire darling.
Danaher, you owe me 350 pounds. Let's have it.
So the IRA's in this too, huh?
If it were Red Will Danaher, not a scorched stone of your fine house would be standing. A beautiful sentiment.
I'll pay you. Never.
That breaks all bargains. You can take your sister back. It's your custom, not mine. No fortune, no marriage. We call it quits.
You'd do this to me? Your own wife? After
It's
what
done.
There's your dirty money. Take it. Count it, you spawn. And look, if ever I see that face of yours again, I'll push that through it.
Charge it!
I'll be going on home now. I'll have the supper ready for you.
My God.
Okay, and that's a good place to stop. So, I don't know if anyone has seen this film before. Maybe some of you have. But to say we were obsessed with it is putting it mildly. Not just the story, but the characters. And also, you know, I gotta say, like that 1-2 punch of sex and violence at a young age was just really kind of overwhelming. So even now, you know, when I watch it, and I'm older than I was then, it's still, you know, I find it kind of strangely seductive and hard to kind of resist in a funny way. So, why am I telling you all this? Just because some of the film images that you take in as a younger person have incredible impact on you before I think you're even sort of fully aware of what it is that you're kind of, you know, imbibing like wholeheartedly and taking in. And especially I think when it comes to depictions of, you know, men and women and sex and love and romance and all that big epic stuff. And, you know, in the pre-internet days, there were very few other options, other than the stuff that was on TV and occasionally the things that you would see that came to, the Tivoli or the drive-in.